Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome into another edition of the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. My name is Jeremy Betts, and I am excited to be getting into another Sunday episode of this show where we answer your questions about the Pittsburgh Steelers, about NFL football, whatever you want to ask in here, we answer it here for you. And I do have a guest with me this week after it just being a solo show last week, and it's somebody you're familiar with, somebody I do a lot of work with here on the Steel Curtain Network and beyond. It's my good buddy, Andrew Wilbar. Andrew, welcome to the Q&A. Welcome back to the Q&A. Thanks for joining. How was your Sunday? How you doing?
It's going really well. Thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to it. I always enjoy the live chats. I don't get to participate in as many, but I always enjoy checking in when I can on the live stream, and you do a great job with the Q&A, so I'm excited to be on. It's going to be a good show.
Why, thank you. I appreciate the vote of confidence there. I'm glad to have you on. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to answer your questions like I mentioned before, so get those in here. We will get to those as they come in. But Andrew, I did want to kind of talk about there's been a lot of hype. It's hype season, and training camp's going to bring a lot more hype as well. But every fan base out there is pretty optimistic for the most part, I would say, about their team and at least the direction they're heading, if not necessarily what they might accomplish in 2024. But Steelers fans specifically have a lot of hope right now, I believe. And a lot of that has to do with some of the upgrades to the roster, some of the addition by subtraction moves that the Steelers have made over the course of the offseason. So I wanted to kind of take a step back and say, are we actually buying here what the Steelers are selling us for 2024? Do we believe the story that the narrative that the Steelers are trying to tell us right now? And I think you can start wherever you want to with this, but let's just start, Andrew, with the fact that I think this team feels like they're an AFC North contender, most definitely, and maybe more than that, maybe an AFC Championship contender. The way they talk about Russell Wilson in that building, the way Mike Tomlin viewed that addition at the time, the addition of Justin Fields as a backup. I mean, this is a team that needed a backup quarterback, that needed something for the future as well. Justin Fields is more than just your Kyle Allen addition at backup, right? So this team, they kind of, all the moves they've made this offseason feel like, we think we're a contender. We think we're a piece or two away, and we've added some of those. Are you buying that this offseason heading into 2024? And feel free to comment on this, listeners, as well. But Andrew, I want to pose the question to you first.
I agree 100%. I think that when you look at the additions the Steelers made to the roster at key positions, you've talked before on how important the inside linebacker position is to the Steelers defense and how it's just not at that elite level when it doesn't have that guy. And you could make the argument the Steelers have multiple guys right now. You look at the way Landon Roberts played toward the end of last season, absolutely outstanding. He's what kept this defense together. And obviously Cole Holcomb, there was a few weeks span at the beginning of the year he struggled, and then once he got acclimated, he was playing fantastic. And then the injury came. You've got him. You got an exciting young rookie not Logan Wilson, in Peyton Wilson.
Peyton Wilson.
And I mean, this guy's got it all. If he can stay healthy, I know he's missing a knee pretty much, but what does that matter in the NFL? And then obviously Patrick Queen. And we had a long debate about which inside linebacker free agent the Steelers should go after. And even though Queen wasn't my first option per se, he is night and day better than what the Steelers had last year. And this can take this defense from a good unit last year, despite all the injuries, to a great unit. And then you put into contribution the new offensive coordinator, new offensive system, the additions to the offensive line, the quarterbacks. And you ask yourself, how, if the Steelers got 10 wins with last year's team, how, despite the schedule, can the Steelers not muster at least 9 wins according to Vegas? That makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah, I think the general consensus is that this team is better than they're being given credit for across the board. They're ready to fight, at least in an AFC North that's going to be very crowded. All 4 teams should come into the season with legitimate thoughts that they could win the division. So I think the Steelers are near the top of that list. And I'm going to say, yes, I do buy that what the Steelers are selling us, that this team is a contender as far as winning a playoff game, winning the AFC North even. I think that is well within the realm of possibility. And we've got a couple people that agree. Afton Forehead, I'm just hoping for a playoff win. I agree, Afton. I think that would be a huge step for this team and an opportunity to, hey, see what the future holds as well, with adding maybe a couple more pieces next year, adding at corner, adding at defensive line, and really shoring up those a couple position groups where the depth could be improved a little bit. But yeah, overall, that playoff win is within reach, I think, this year. I don't think that the Steelers they may be fighting to get in the playoffs because the AFC is loaded, Andrew, but I don't think this is a team that backs into the playoffs and is just grateful to be there and hoping to pull off some kind of crazy upset. If they make the playoffs this year, this is a team that you don't want to face, in my opinion. What do you think?
I agree. And for every year, it seems like the Steelers will never be that team that wants to go 14-3, 15-2. Under Mike Tomlin, the Steelers will find ways to lose games they shouldn't, and they'll always find a way to maybe not have as good of a record as what you would think. But regardless of whether they win the division, whether they don't win the division, if they are fully healthy and they're in the playoffs once you get there, you don't want to mess with them because you have a quarterback that's been there and done that in Russell Wilson. And worst case scenario, if something were to happen to him, you have Justin Fields, who, if you're in the playoffs with Justin Fields, more than likely he's had a fantastic season. So either way, I think it's a win-win.
Yeah, I really do agree. Let me pull up a couple things here. I had it pulled up on accident, but I do want to talk about it. John S. says, I'm nervous about what a win looks like a playoff win. A feeling like winning the turnover battle was a key to victory last year. Just a totally new offense that worries me. Obviously better talent, but still unknown. That's a great point to make, I think, because we do have high hopes for this offense. We do have high hopes for what it could be with the departure of Matt Canada, the departure of Kenny Pickett, the upgrades at those two spots, offensive coordinator and quarterback, and then some of the other additions along the offensive line. There's a good chance we do see improvement, but there's also a good chance, Andrew, that we see a slow start offensively to the season. And I think we do have to have some patience with this offense. It's not something where you should be expecting to go out week one and put up 35 points necessarily with this new offense. I think that there's going to be some growing pains, obviously, some figuring things out. But when you compare a brand new offense figuring things out to a third-year offense under Matt Canada, I feel like the Steelers even still have a chance of being better prepared to play football on offense, even considering all the newness, than they even did last year. What do you think?
Yeah, I think especially when you're talking about, like the person was asking about the turnover battle, it is, but when you're talking about the offensive system, the bar was just set so low with Matt Canada that I think there's obviously fear of the unknown. There always is whenever change happens, and not just in football, just in general life. But when you're talking about an offense that was so, there's no words to describe how bad it was.
Unwatchable.
Unwatchable is the best word you can think of. And I did some articles for SCN recently projecting the yard totals for different offensive positions, quarterback, running back, wide receiver. And really, when you look at the numbers last year, I know that scoring and yardage was down last year across the board. But just going by last year's numbers, if the Steelers as a team throw for 3,800 passing yards, I mean, I think that's an attainable number. For a team with Russell Wilson, you've got an improved offensive line. Maybe Justin Fields takes over and maybe the passing game takes a little bit of a dip, but that only improves the running game. But you've got Pickens, you got Freiermuth, you have a young rookie in Roman Wilson, you still have weapons. It's just the media. I know Daniel Jeremiah's comments this past week, everyone's talking about, oh, Daniel Jeremiah doesn't seem as a number one. Well, I think he already is a number one, and he proved that last year, putting up the numbers he did despite having horrendous quarterback play and a horrendous offensive system that didn't know how to scheme him up as the wide receiver one. But all of that put aside, I think that the concern for the offense needs to be a little bit lessened because of how bad it's been. It's just at that point, what do you have to lose? When things come to a certain point, you just hit rock bottom. It's like you can't go anywhere but up. I'm not the biggest fan of Arthur Smith, and I've voiced that on our show, The Steelers Fix, before. But he is so much better than what the Steelers had before. He is going to be glorified in Pittsburgh because it's at least a competent NFL offense. It may not necessarily be my favorite offense, but it's at least worked to some extent in the NFL. Maybe not when he was a head coach, but as an offensive coordinator, he did a good job. So let's see what he does here. I think worst case scenario, you fire him after a year or two, knowing that you are still better than what you were previously, because there's no way to be any worse.
Absolutely. And this is a guy too that could be looking to move back into the head coach ranks at some point.
Yeah.
So he's going to try his hardest to work this out with this offense. And not that Matt Canada wasn't trying hard. I just don't think he knew how to coach at the NFL level. There's a disconnect. Yeah, true. There's a disconnect for some guys between what they envision and how they teach it and implement it. And that's where things went haywire for Canada. I think you see a lot more continuity and a lot more decisiveness from this group right away, a lot better understanding of the offense as a whole. And I think the Steelers position coach hires are going to play just as an important role in that as their hire of the offensive coordinator, as their addition of Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, all of that. I want to bring up a couple more comments here before we go to the break, just to kind of continue our conversation here. Jeremiah Yoder, I think our Pittsburgh Steelers are going to enjoy beating up on the AFC North Division in 2024. It's a good point, this statement here, Andrew, because the Steelers do fare well against their division. They know how to play in the AFC North. So I don't think we look at any of the three AFC North opponents and say, ooh, I don't want to face that team in December. I don't want to face that team in November, January. It would honestly be a welcome draw, right? If you land one of those three teams in the playoffs, especially Baltimore or Cleveland, I would feel really comfortable about that. Here's a good one from Dennis Povlak. Honestly, if we put up 20 to 23 points week one, that would be great. That would be a great start for this offense, something solid that you can build on. I want to see a foundation laid that you can build on, that you can grow from. And the week one opponent is the Atlanta Falcons. That was a pretty decent defense actually last year. And I would expect Raheem Morris to coach up those guys. So I would expect that to be a kind of a punch you in the mouth game to start. And I think both defenses will come to play. So I think that would be great as well. Dennis, I agree with you there. Let's see. We'll get to this question a little bit later, but here's one. Andrew, Mark Malone is our resident Mason Rudolph fan, one of a couple, and Fields hater, Justin Fields hater. It's going to come down to QB play. Mark Malone says, can Wilson or Fields play half as good as Mason? We'll see. Andrew, would you agree that both of those guys are actually way better than anything we've ever seen from Mason, even as they are right now?
Well, Mark Malone, thank you for being a loyal YouTuber on the Steel Curtain Network.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
I've seen you in the comment section a lot, so I appreciate your contributions and I like the perspective. But I've got to completely disagree with you here. Don't get me wrong, Mason Rudolph looked solid toward the end of last year, but let's not get carried away with ourselves. There's been times when Justin Fields he had absolutely nothing to work with. I would argue that as bad as the Steelers offense was last year, Mason Rudolph had a whole lot more to work with than what Justin Fields ever did in Chicago. And when you especially put into play the consistent flux of offensive coordinators he had to deal with and just the turmoil that was taking place with that team, Justin Fields has not had a chance. And I think we would also argue that just a year ago, after his first season, he finished that first season very strong, actually. And it may not show up on the stat sheet, but when you watch those games in clutch moments, he made key throws. When he had to make a throw, he did. And he was using his athleticism, but not abusing it. And if he can get back to that level, he doesn't have to become this elite superstar. We were talking about Justin Fields as a potential top 12 quarterback going into his second year in the league. And then he struggled with injuries. Different things came up. But I would argue Justin Fields' rookie season, we saw better than what we've ever seen from Mason Rudolph. And Russell Wilson, obviously, we've seen a lot from him. And, we'll see how much he has left in the tank. But 26 touchdowns, 8 interceptions last year, and that was not playing 2 games. I'll take that all day. If Justin Fields can get 24 touchdowns in 17 games, I think that would be a big win for the Steelers. If the Steelers can move the ball on the ground, which obviously they're going to try with Arthur Smith.
Here's a great comment from Steve Pickering. He's going to actually say that he is not buying what the Pittsburgh Steelers are selling us this year. Definitely not buying what the Steelers are selling. They've got a young line, no second wide receiver, no money spent on upgrading the offense. That matters. You have to be a balanced team. I think that the financial story on offense tells a false tale for the Steelers this year because they got both quarterbacks so cheap, and it's a rookie offensive line. It's rookies and second-year players on the offensive line. It's you're talking about cheap talent that could turn into high-end talent pretty quickly, especially when you talk about Fields and when you talk about the two rookies on the offensive line. So, yes, it's young. Yes, there's going to take time for that to gel. Yes, the wide receiver position, you could argue, and many fans are, that the Steelers don't have a true wide receiver 2 on this team. Andrew, you and I have argued that may not matter as much as on paper it would appear. So, Steve, I get the concerns, but I would say that money-wise, spending money on upgrading the offensive line, they did that. It just was cheap this year, and it didn't cost them a lot. So eventually, yes, if they made the right moves, that's going to come back, and you'll see that in the paychecks. But at this time, the Steelers made a ton of upgrades, Andrew, without breaking the bank. Do you agree with that take? Do you get some of Steve's concerns, though, as well?
Right. I understand where he's coming from. And when you look at it on paper, it can be a little concerning, but I would make the argument that it's easier to find value at offense than it is defense in the modern day, because the rules are bent so hard against the defense that to be a standout defensive player, you have to be truly elite. To be just good in the NFL, you have to be on a totally different level. And that's why I respect defenders so much, because all the rules are bent against them, because the NFL knows more point scoring gets them more money, because it gets more casual fans interested in it, and the diehards, they'll watch it regardless. We talk a lot about the running back position, how you can get running backs pretty much whenever. You don't need to spend an early pick on it. Just look at the Steelers. You have Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, and you could make the argument that the undrafted free agent in Jaylen Warren is doing better overall than what Najee Harris is. I think a lot of Steelers fans would say that he's probably the best running back the Steelers have on the roster. I know that that's a totally different debate inside of itself. But wide receiver, the Steelers have been able to find different guys in the middle rounds as well. And the wide receiver classes keep coming out deeper and deeper and deeper. And all this money is being pushed toward these big name wide receivers. But take a look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Isaiah Pacheco is their running back. They didn't spend a high draft pick on Isaiah Pacheco. Rashee Rice was a day 2 draft pick. A lot of their receivers, I know they spent a first on Xavier Worthy this year. But Marquise Brown, a bargain in free agency by all means. They got the cheap guy in free agency on a prove it deal. The good teams don't allocate a bunch of money to their skill position players. Quarterback, you may have to. But I just the article that came out this week at running back specifically, I did for SCN. In the last 10 Super Bowls, the highest annual salary by the starting running back of the team that's won out of the past 10 Super Bowls would have been, I believe it was the Los Angeles Rams, who had Cam Akers when he had just kind of emerged into that starting role when he was on his rookie contract. And that was just like $2.3 million a year. Isaiah Pacheco, you're talking about LeGarrette Blunts of the world that were on 1 year, $1 million contracts. These are positions you don't have to spend a lot of money to. That's why I like how the Steelers are building the roster with Omar Khan and Andy Weidl. They're allocating money toward positions of need on the defense, and they're paying money to the players on the defense that are truly elite at what they do. And then they're putting their draft assets toward places like the offensive line, guys that are going to cost a lot of money at the end of their first contract, but there's a high hit rate early on, and you can't find those later on in the draft. So that's why I'm not as worried about that. I know that's a long response to that, but I truly believe skill position players you can get later, just about as late as any position.
Yeah, you've got to be able to. I think the whole picture here. Yes, the Steelers do spend more on defense than anybody else, but when you look at, like, I was just looking at the Kansas City Chiefs difference here. They do spend more on offense than they do on defense, but you have to factor in that Patrick Mahomes' contract is huge, right?
Yeah.
And the Steelers don't have that at quarterback. When you find the quarterback, then it automatically skews to the offensive side because that quarterback's just going to take up such a huge chunk of your salary cap. So in reality, it's pretty close. It's 98 million offensively to 71 million defensively for the Chiefs based on their roster after winning the Super Bowl last season. So, and that 98 million, let's see here, the 17 million more that the Chiefs are paying to the offense than the defense. Okay, add another 15 to that. And that is Patrick Mahomes' contract, $35 million, against the cap in 2023. That's how much they were spending on just the quarterback alone. So if you take out the quarterback position, they're actually spending more on defense than they are on offense. So it goes to your point, Andrew. I agree with you there. So, all right, let's do this. Let's go ahead and take our break here on the audio side. If you're listening live, don't go anywhere. The Steelers Sunday night Q&A will be right back. All right, welcome back to the Sunday night Q&A. Jeremy Betts, Andrew Wilbar joining me for this weekend's episode, and I'm glad you are all tuning in to the show live. If you missed this for some reason, you are not available on a Sunday night, what could you possibly be doing on a Sunday night at 9:00 rather than listening to the Steel Curtain Network's Steelers Sunday night Q&A? But anyway, be that as it may, you guys, if you missed it, check it out on audio wherever you get your podcasts. We post this after that goes the next morning. So check that out if you missed it. If you're listening live, though, we appreciate you. Keep sending in your comments and questions. We're going to get to those. All right, Andrew, I've got a fun one here. It's a topic of conversation we've had several times, but Kathy Forehead asks this question. If neither quarterback turns out to be the guy, how will the Steelers find their next big hope? Andrew, what pathway would you take if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers if neither quarterback looks like the guy after 2024?
Well, I just don't know if the Steelers can have both answered in 1 year. Russell Wilson, I think you're going to have that answered, assuming he's the starter. But I don't know that unless Justin Fields wins the starting job outright, I don't know if you're going to get a true answer on Justin Fields this year. So unless he is the starter the entire season and plays absolutely awful, and I'm saying this as a University of Michigan fan. I'm a huge Michigan fan. It hurts me to say it, but Justin Fields is one of the most underappreciated quarterbacks in the entire league. I think that he deserves a fair chance in more than 1 year in a system. He's never had a chance to be in the same system for more than a year. It's a constant turnover with him. He needs some continuity. So I would say you're not going to get that answer. If for some reason Fields plays and he plays absolutely awful, I don't know that your answer is going to come in the draft right now. I'm not a big fan of the top guys. Carson Beck, I believe, is overrated from Georgia. You talk about Shedeur Sanders. He's an interesting name, but he's going to be gone way before the Steelers are on the clock. Quinn Ewers, same thing. It's not going to be good if one of them isn't the guy. But I'm more confident than most that one of them can be and will be. So I would say unless Fields is absolutely horrible, run with Fields for another year. And if he's as bad as what some people think he could be, you're finally picking high enough to where you can get your quarterback. Yes, it's going to take longer, but that's the only way you can do it in the NFL. If you want one of your guys, you're going to have to get into the top 5 for whatever to get them, regardless of whether you think their value is that or not.
Yeah. I think there's so many directions this could go. And I guess you do have to decide what are you going to pay Justin Fields next year if Russell Wilson's not the guy and you want to figure it out with Fields. Go ahead.
A question I had for you, Jeremy, and I guess for the live chat as well. I wrote an article about 2 years ago on why I gave 3 trade candidates, the 3 players the Steelers should consider trading for. One of them was Jordan Love.
Yeah.
Could you imagine
that
if we had Jordan Love right now? Can you imagine where we would be?
I know it. It was a missed opportunity. I don't know if the Packers were ever actually going to deal him, but
right.
If the plan had been to ride with Rodgers and ditch the young guy that hadn't had any playing time, then yeah, the Steelers would have been and right to jump all over that. Absolutely. So I think that it's a tough conversation when you're trying to talk about what the Steelers can do to move on from these quarterbacks, because like you said, it's going to be hard to find out about both guys this year unless Russell Wilson just totally stinks and over the first half of the season, and then Fields kind of gives you a glimpse at what he could be if he were labeled the full-time starter for a full off season, and then you want to try to give him a contract of some kind for next year. But it's going to be hard to figure that out. I think the Steelers, though, financially, they can get out of both of these guys and move on quickly without it strapping them cap-wise, and they can draft a guy. They could go sign the big price free agent, Andrew, Dak Prescott, for $60 million.
No.
Give me your thoughts on that, live chat. Let's go. But still, there's so many options for them. So comes down to how this season plays out. So I think, though, we have to kind of take a step back and understand something about this season. If Justin Fields becomes the starter at some point this season, it probably means this team is not a playoff contender. It probably means this team is not an AFC North contender, and that they're just kind of a feisty team, good defense that, I mean, you know, I just don't think that there's a chance that the Steelers, I don't know. It's tough. It's a tough choice. Oh, shoot. The Dak talk. I didn't mean to pull that up, but that's a good one. Afton, I'm sorry. But Dak, you know, he's one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. So I can't hide my love for him there. But so let's move on here. I've got another comment here from Joseph. Oh man, I'm not going to even try the last name, Joseph. I'm sorry. Don't forget, last year in preseason, we thought we were unbeatable. Do you think all these moves will bear results, say, in the 2025 season? Do you think, Andrew, that this team looks like a team that could really, really compete in 2025 with a couple more additions, and that this is kind of the staging year for that? Or do you think 2024 could kind of bring it all together?
No, I think last year the reason we bought in was because every offensive coordinator that had more than 10 plays in their playbook was they were holding everything off except 10 plays that they were running in the preseason. So Matt Canada was on their level. He was on the preseason level of the other teams the Steelers were facing. So it didn't look like the Steelers offense was really going to be that bad because they were running the same type of 10 plays that every other team was playing in the preseason. So I looked, the Steelers are running just as good of an offense as anybody else. So that's sure going to come in the rest of it's going to be that way the rest of the season. And that wasn't the case. So I think this year, regardless of what happens in the preseason, I don't care what about wins or losses, but you want to see positional battles figured out, and you want to get clear direction there. And I think the Steelers are going to have some battles inside linebacker, whether it be Kyron Johnson versus Mark Robinson. You've got obviously wide receiver depth. I know Denzel Mims is gone, but you got Marquez Callaway versus Scotty Bugatti Miller, and you got I don't know, you got several guys there, and there's going to be competition at these spots, and you want to get an answer in the preseason. I think the Steelers will have an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, I think that there's a good chance that this unit, with it being so young, especially on the offensive side of the ball, that they can put together a good season this year and then really, really round it out for 2025, especially if you know the quarterback situation. If Russell Wilson balls out this year, Andrew, there's a chance that they stick with him next year and that he's their guy. And there's a good chance of that, I would say. Easily as good a chance that is the case as it is that he's only okay and the Steelers move forward with Fields. So I just don't know. We'll have to see how this plays out. I'm very excited, though, for both quarterbacks. I really am. I think that there's a chance that we see Fields be dynamic even in role play this year, and that Fields does just enough, or excuse me, that Wilson does just enough to keep the offense middle of the pack, like we talked about a couple weeks ago on the Steelers Fix, and that the defense and a middle of the road offense are enough to be extremely competitive in the AFC. If you look at last year's Super Bowl champions, Andrew, they were a middle of the pack offense all year, and a great defense all year. That's what won us Super Bowl last year. And I know that quarterback was Patrick Mahomes. I understand that. So, don't come at me for that, anybody listening, but it is team building wise, it still works. Defense can still win championships. And I think the Steelers, I'm not going to say they're going to go to a Super Bowl this year, but I think if they play to the potential of this team, that they could be in that conversation.
No, I agree.
All righty, let's see. Here's a good question, follow-up question from Afton. If they stick with Russ after this year, do they draft a quarterback early to develop behind him? That could be a great option for them, especially if they're like picking in the middle of the draft or they want to trade up or something like that for a falling quarterback, much like the Bears did for Justin Fields a few years ago. That could be something that they try to do. The Fields situation it's going to be tricky if Russell Wilson plays really well. Fields going to want to stick there in Pittsburgh and take a smaller extended deal to see if he can play after Russ, maybe in 2026 or something like that. Could he be their rookie quarterback, if you will, or do they move on to that draft pick? I think, though, that it's going to be hard to find a quarterback that can stick for your team outside of maybe those top 10 picks. We start to see that year after year here, that if you're picking outside the top 10, sometimes even the top 5, and you get that quarterback, then you're going to struggle to find an answer at the position. So it's very rare that the Brock Purdy comes along, that the Tom Brady comes along, that, even a guy like Derek Carr, who was a second-round pick, right, has had some good seasons, but he's not a franchise guy. I mean, the Raiders moved on. The Saints there's a good chance he's not playing quarterback for the Saints as the starter by the end of this year. And so it just seems to me like if the Steelers ever want to find that answer in a rookie, they're going to have to pay the price to get up there in the draft, whether that's have a really bad season or whether that's trade a haul of draft picks to get up there. Do you think the Steelers could draft a quarterback, though, Andrew, if they decide to stick with Russ after this year?
I could see it. I think this year, this 2025 draft is going to be loaded at defensive line. Yes. And this seems to be the prime year for the Steelers to finally get Cameron Hayward's replacement. I really think this is the year the Steelers should and could do it without having to trade up. They could get a guy that could potentially fit that role. You have so many guys that are in that level. And I'm not a prophet, but I'm just telling you right now, there's going to be some of you that are in the live chat right now, especially those of you that are Penn State fans. We're going to be talking, I don't know, 8 months from now, and you are going to be putting in the live chat. There will be someone, mark my words, Jeremy, there will be someone that'll be saying Drew Aller is the next Ben Roethlisberger, and the Steelers need to draft him at pick 22 or wherever the Steelers are drafting. The Steelers can get him here. If the Steelers can get Drew Aller there, that is probably a good reason why he is probably not going to be the next Ben Roethlisberger. Yeah. He's still, I like Aller, but he's got a lot of developing ahead of him. But just throwing that out there, he's one of those sneaky names I could see Steelers fans getting on board with because of the locality, but every guy right there outside of the top 3 that are projected to go top 10, they're just names right now. Jalen Milrow, people are talking about. Cameron Ward, I like him. He's got a lot of upside, but he hasn't proven it yet. Will he ever? It's just all a bunch of questions. And then we'll have this one guy that will come up from nowhere, and who knows? He may end up being the number 1 pick. We don't even know who that is right now.
Yeah. Yeah. The Steelers are going to have a lot of decisions on their hands after this year. But right now, 2024 is a big year for this team to see what they have in the young guys on offense. If Joey Porter Jr. can take another step at corner, if Keanu Benton becomes the heir apparent in reality to Cam Hayward, and really takes that step forward, if this linebacker group works, Andrew, there's a lot of questions to be answered everywhere. But as it stands, the Steelers have done a fantastic job, I think, of putting together a roster to compete in 2024 and one that you can continue to build on in 2025. I have no doubts that Omar Khan and Andy Weidel, they have a plan that sees beyond 2024. It sees beyond the next season. And I think Kevin Colbert, when he was the GM of the Steelers, he started making picks for the next year. It wasn't future, a vision for the future in how he handled his business. It wasn't, okay, we're going to add these pieces in 2024. Next year, we're going to add these pieces. The year after that, we're going to add these pieces. We're going to pay these guys. And in 3 years, we're going to have a juggernaut team. That wasn't his focus, because the Steelers felt like they could win it any year with Ben Roethlisberger. And so I'm not throwing that all on Colbert's shoulders here, but it did seem like the Steelers lived in a this is our year world. And now I think Omar Khan has a little bit more of a futuristic vision to him. And I think that plays into the Steelers' plans here, and into the Steelers, the way they've done business this year. It's going to be fun to watch how it all comes together. All right. I'm trying to find it again. There was a fantastic comment from, I think, Steve Pickering about Justin Fields. But anyway,
I had one that.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I had one. Just a question that was brought up. Is it against NFL rules to trade the 2025 fourth round pick? I believe it would be, because anything that is pending in a trade is pretty much you can't use it. It's pretty much frozen. You can't do anything with it until it's determined, the condition is determined. And obviously in this case, that would have to be the end of the season when Fields either did or didn't play enough snaps to garner that fourth round pick.
Yeah, I believe you're correct. That one would be off the table. I don't know. So yeah, I agree. I agree that is how it goes. Okay, here's the comment here from Steve Pickering. Just because people don't like Fields don't mean they're a hater. Okay. And it just means they watched him play. Guy kissing Fields' butt. Are you an Ohio State fan? Okay. I want to answer this question in a couple different ways. First off, Andrew, are you an Ohio State fan, Andrew Wilmar?
That is blasphemy. I am a die-hard University of Michigan fan, national champion University of Michigan fans. Go Blue.
Andrew Wilmar, have you watched Justin Fields play football?
I have. I go to college in Chicago, so I know I hear, know, and watch just about all of his games.
Okay, so I just wanted to get that out there, Steve, first, because half of this show hates the Buckeyes and has definitely watched him play football. The other half has definitely watched him play football, but yes, is an Ohio State Buckeyes fan. I am a Buckeyes fan. So I do have some attachment to Fields based on the fact that he was an Ohio State Buckeye, but I think I can sit here and consciously say that I I have watched him play, and I see a lot of potential there that the Steelers have never had in a quarterback outside of Ben Roethlisberger, ever. Outside of Slash and Ben Roethlisberger, they have never had a guy with this much upside and potential. I'm not saying he's going to get there, but he has more upside and potential than almost all the quarterbacks in the NFL, especially the mid-tier guys in back, obviously. But he's got top 5 potential. And it's that P word, yes. And I've seen him play. Yes, I have. I watched nearly every snap of Justin Fields from the last 3 years, and I'm telling you, it is a crazy watch. It really is. I understand the reservations about his accuracy, about his decision-making, about his ability to read the pocket. But I also understand that there's a specific way that quarterbacks play, and Justin Fields was constantly, Andrew, you'll agree with this, I know it. He was constantly swimming upstream in Chicago in that scheme with what they were asking him to do. And from day one here in Pittsburgh, Arthur Smith and this coaching staff said, do what's comfortable. Do what's comfortable. If there's anything I feel comfortable about with this unit, is that they can build an offense around the players that they have and not try to pigeonhole guys into a specific play style based on what they like to do on offense. So this is a much better scenario for Justin Fields. I'm not saying it's going to work out. You may very well be right that he is not a good NFL quarterback, but I don't think you can honestly sit there and watch football and say that he is worse than Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph or anybody that the Steelers have had playing quarterback for them since 2019 when Roethlisberger hurt his elbow. So that's my take. Andrew, I'll give you a final take on this as well before we go, but we're going to head out of here in just a second. Andrew, your final take on the Fields question and argument here.
Well, there were two comments I wanted to bring up, one of which goes along with it. And this is from John S. It's a really good point. Many Bears fans want him over a number 1 overall quarterback. This was a big discussion in Chicago. This wasn't just a national media thing. Oh, they're just figuring out how to get rid of Justin Fields. No, there was a large portion of the fan base that wanted Fields to be the star. If you remember toward the end of last year, the fans were chanting his name. That was never the case with Mitch Trubisky.
Yep.
Mitch Trubisky was getting booed before he ever played a snap. And whether it be Fields or Trubisky, everyone eggs the guys that they start off their career horribly. They can never come around. They're automatic bust. Fans have a big part in a player's confidence.
Yep.
And at the quarterback position, confidence is so important. And when you have fan bases that constantly egg and constantly get on your quarterback before he has a chance to prove himself, some guys can handle it. Some of them can't. I understand that it's nice when you have a guy that can just handle it all. Not everyone is built like that and able to handle everyone talking negatively about them all the time. Not every guy can handle it. Some guys are just lower confident or have lower confidence than others. Mitch Trubisky, I think we can safely say that was the truth. It wasn't that Mitch never had potential. He had a lot of potential, but he was never given a chance and he couldn't overcome the adversity that came with all the fans hating him before he ever had a chance to prove himself. I think that was a big reason why he never turned out. In Justin Fields, I believe there were a lot of fans that liked him, but there were a lot of fans that didn't as well. Now he gets a fresh new start in a city that I hope will at least give him a chance. And if they do, I think he's going to prove to be something. And then real quickly, Jeremy, I just want to bring up this one other comment because it was kind of following up with Steve's, like we talked about earlier about ignoring the offense. It would take 5 years just to build offense through the draft. If it takes 5 years to build the offense, Steve, my question for you is how long does it take to build the defense? Because like we talked about earlier, it's harder in today's day and age to find elite defensive players. And the Steelers have them, so you got to pay them. TJ Watt, you can't just say we're going to get rid of TJ Watt, allocate that money to the offense. We'll sign ourselves. I mean, Jimmy, how much is TJ Watt making per year? Do you know that?
I don't off the top of my head, but I think it's around 30 million a year. Around there.
Around 30 million a year. So who would be more valuable to the Steelers, TJ Watt or Justin Jefferson? The Steelers could have traded for Justin Jefferson and brought on that contract, but who truly provides the most value? You can at least, we're seeing the rate receivers are coming out, and you can find maybe not a Justin Jefferson, but you can find guys that can be number 1. Look at San Francisco. They're figuring out what to do with all their weapons. Deebo Samuel was their 1. Then Brandon Ayuk finally emerged. He was their 1. And now they have Ricky Pearsall, who's impressing in camp, and they're figuring out what to do because they don't have room for all these pieces in their offense. Yeah. If you can scout wide receivers, and I know the Steelers have had their share of busts too. I understand that whole argument, but wide receiver is not as difficult position to evaluate as some people think. And all these skill position players, I would rather invest in the offensive line and the defense. TJ 4 years, 112 million. So that's
28 a year.
28 a year. I mean, you're paying a wide receiver more, and you're going to say a wide receiver it provides more value than a guy like TJ Watt, who's the best, arguably in my opinion, the best defensive player in all of football. You have to count the cost there. And I think it's much more worth it to just continuously replace pieces on offense because they can get acclimated quicker. They can get into a new offense, especially with all the spread concepts coming out. Mm-hmm. It's much easier to get acclimated than to learn a new defense. They have to learn, totally different zone concepts, cover concepts they never had in college. And the learning curve is a lot bigger than it is for a wide receiver who's run pretty much the same routes. You have a few more option routes, or a running back. Nothing really changes. In the offensive line, you have different scheme changes, but for the most part, you understand the main job, the main duty of your job. So that's where I disagree, Steve. I like the perspective, but I've got to strongly disagree there. To me, it's much easier to build your offense through the draft than it is the defense. When you have key defensive players, you need to pay them because there's not that many of them, and there's only going to be a decreasing amount as we become more prone to these spread offenses in a league that wants to see points scored.
Yep. And, the truth is always going to be in the league as we view it now. If you don't have the quarterback, you don't really have anything. You have to at least have a quarterback who can manage it to perfection. And if you don't, then, it's either got to be a exceptional game manager like a Brock Purdy, or it's got to be a superstar like Mahomes, like Burrow. That's how you win Super Bowls in this league. And I think that Russell Wilson has a chance to be the Steelers' Brock Purdy. I really do. I think he's got that chance. And I think Fields, if given the opportunity, and if he can settle into who he is, has a chance to be the superstar potentially that can get them over the hump. Whether he's got the clutch gene, whatever, I don't know. There's a lot of things to figure out about Justin Fields, but he's got more upside than we've seen out of anybody else on this team. Dave Schofield put the information out there. $30.4 million cap hit this year. So, but yes, $28 million average per year. He's so important to this team. You can't tell me that Brandon Ayuk coming in, you could pay him more. I don't see how you could do that if you're the Steelers. So, all right, that's going to do it for us here on the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. We appreciate all the interaction. Hey, it's good to have disagreements. It's good to have agreements. It's good to converse about all these things. That's what this show is for. Keep coming back. Give us your thoughts. Give us your opinions. Give us your questions. We love to have you here on the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. Andrew, I appreciate you joining me. I keep saying tuning in. You do that sometimes anyway, but I appreciate you joining me tonight. We're going to head out, and we hope that you'll join us again next week here on the Steel Curtain Network on the Steelers Sunday Night Q&A. Have a good night, everybody.